off the cuff here, I wanted to do a video on the Venezuela issue because it's been in the news frequently, and generally speaking, I was uninformed about it. And so I read some articles and did some research, and this is going to be sort of a layman's introduction to another layman on the topic. So the reason that the topic has come to the forefront is because depending on how you view it, the person who is trying to usurp power is calling for the military to abandon the current president Maduro, and so it's likely that whatever's happening is going to escalate, and the lines are beginning to be drawn between world powers, and we are on the opposite side of China and Russia on the issue. And so, as every other commenter on YouTube and Twitter or whatever have noted, it is issues like this that start major wars, where groups of powerful countries take a stake in what on the global stage is the small affairs of one minor country. And so I wanted to talk a little bit about this issue and describe in a limited way my understanding of what has happened there, in the hopes that I can interest anyone who's watching our videos to go and do their own research and go ahead and fact check me on it. I like I said, I'm no expert on this topic. It's a little bit outside of our wheelhouse. It's a little bit more complex. We're relatively novice. I don't have the historical background really to make a full critique of this issue. So I also don't know which side of it I stand on. And so I thought we could talk about that a little bit. So the basic premise here, the guy who is trying to take power is the opposition leader Juan Guaido, I believe is the correct pronunciation. So it was Hugo Chavez, and he presided over what I understand to be like a pretty good time for Venezuela, because they had high profits from oil and a couple other resources. And when Chavez died, I believe, he or left office or whatever. I'm outing myself here. Like I said, this is not an issue to which I'm expert. When Chavez went away, he picked up somebody to take his stead, and that was Maduro. And Maduro only won by 1.6%. And now, over the course of his reign, things have gotten super bad for Venezuela. I didn't realize how fucked up it is. Basic shit like canned food is going up by thousands of percent in price. And so it's called hyperinflation, a concept which the theme of this video I am hyper unqualified to talk about, because I have no economic background. But
my only awareness of hyperinflation is anytime I hear it talked about, they always talk about years ago there was an instance of it over in the Russian sphere of influence, where people were taking wheelbarrows of cash to the store to buy a loaf of bread or something similar like that. So
yes, it's that type of scary.
Yeah, it's an economic thing that is, you can study on your own, but it's a well-known thing.
Forgive me here. I printed out this a good article from the BBC. And so basically, then recently, they held another election, but tons of opposition parties boycotted it, and it's widely viewed as an illegitimate election. And the opposition party didn't accept the election of Maduro. And then, if I understand it correctly, they effectively ousted the opposition party and the whole other branch of government, and he created his own that's all government loyalists. And so they're all making the decisions, and they're just ignoring this other legislative body who is headed by this, what was it? Guaido. I keep wanting to call it Gaipo. And so they're going back and forth about who's going to take power, and the pawn, or sort of, and I guess not the pawn, but the most important piece in the chess game that's happening is the military, of course. And the other problem is that the United States and lots of other countries have recognized Guaido, and are calling Maduro a dictator. And then you have countries like Russia and China who are saying, you are meddling in the affairs of another state, and you shouldn't be doing that. And it's a complex issue, and I don't know where I fall on it. I did see some charts of there was a mass exodus from Venezuela of like several million people, and it's troubling. So I mean, what do you, now that I've said that sort of like basic primer, like, do you think we should be over there fucking around? Because we're our guys, Trump and whatever, are talking about keeping military options on the table.
I think what would end up happening, honestly, in my uneducated guess, is we would end up in another, Korea, Vietnam sort of situation where the U.S. comes and flops its wet dick on the table and nothing happens, and we just make things worse, and then we leave and nothing's better. I don't think what's going on is good. I certainly don't think that the types of things you're describing are positive. But certainly, like, military intervention, at least historically speaking, is not something that we've been able to do well when it comes to interfering in, the sovereignty of other nations. Mm-hmm. That being said, I also think that it's worth noting, I'm not really surprised to hear that we're on the opposite side of this as China and Russia. I think there's this attitude today that we've kind of made up with China and Russia, and that, maybe economically or here and there we're not on the best of terms, but generally speaking, we are equal nations and so on. And that's just wrong. If you look at the history of it, like, the Cold War ended, but it didn't. Officially, we're not at Cold War, but we're not friends with Russia. I've said this before to you, but never on the channel. It's interesting when you start to dig into it a bit more, how there's all this sort of Cold War tension that still goes on between us. How, for example, I know in Iraq and Afghanistan, I had read a few articles about how there were reports of Russian soldiers being present when we didn't know, and there were the occasional death on one side or the other where U.S. soldiers killed Russians or Russians killed U.S. soldiers, and it was just kind of swept under the rug because they didn't want it to ignite anything else.
Right.
Things of that nature where we're clashing with them. So I definitely don't think we should do nothing, because we also don't necessarily want China and Russia to come in and do something. However, like I said, I'm kind of way out of my depth here. I don't think military options are a good idea, at least not at the outset. I think, again, we just don't have a good track record.